Hi guys, I'm a fourth year student at Western University. I'm in health sciences. My name is Parth. And if you guys are watching this video, you guys probably want some tips on how to study for the Canadian DAT, which I wrote this past February, February 2019. And so hopefully I can share some things that'll make you guys' lives a little bit easier when you guys are studying and preparing for the Canadian DAT. So you guys are probably wondering what my scores were if I'm making a video on how to study for the DAT. I did pretty well. So I scored a 21 on reading comprehension, a 24 in bio, a 28 in chem. Pat was my lowest score at 19, and my academic average was 24. So let's get into some resources. I know there's so many different resources for chem, bio, perceptual ability, different things that might stress people out before they even start studying for the DAT. I personally use DAT Bootcamp because it was an all-in-one resource, and it is tailor-made for the American DAT, but it has just so much content that it works just as well for the Canadian DAT. Although if I had to redo it, I would probably save some money and buy the DAT Crusher, which is made for the Canadian DAT. For chem, there's other things you can get, such as you can get Chad's videos, which are pretty popular. DAT Bootcamp had its own set of chemistry videos called Mike's videos, which I use and found really well. So let's talk about some bio resources. There are a couple different resources, most popular being Feralis notes, which you can get for free on the DAT Bootcamp website. I believe they're called just like the bio revised notes or like the short notes. But basically they were what everyone knows as the Feralis notes, and they basically bought the Feralis notes and kind of just cleaned them up a bit, added some things, cut some things, and kind of just revamped it, I guess. But it's there for free. You don't have to buy DAT Bootcamp to get the Feralis notes. They're available online for free. So I used that. It was completely perfect in my opinion. It went over all of the information that you needed to know and didn't really go over anything that you didn't need to know. And it went over things in the right depth. It didn't really kind of skip out on some stuff. It was still pretty hefty in terms of the amount of content it had, but I think Feralis Notes is really like the best resource you can get for the bio section of the DAT. Cliff Notes just goes way too in depth, and I feel like you're just wasting your time going over the amount of content that Cliff Notes has when you could just be doing Feralis Notes and do just as well on the DAT. So my first tip on studying for the DAT is just to have persistence. The DAT isn't necessarily hard per se. It's not, genetics, or I guess genetics is easy for some people, but it's not like physics for me. Physics for me is really, really hard. It's not that the content is difficult. What's difficult about studying for the DAT is just the amount of hours you have to put in to study the enormous amount of content that you have to learn for the DAT. So the biggest tip is just to have persistence. Like, you really do have to study for quite a while in terms of being able to cover so much content and study for so many different subjects. If you don't have the persistence, I can almost guarantee you're not going to do well. Like, it's just by virtue of the amount of content that you have to learn, you really do have to study it for a long amount of time to be able to keep that content in your head and also be able to cover all of the material that you need to know. So my second tip on how to study for the DAT is if you're taking it, in February or November, you really do have to manage your time and look ahead and see when you have your coursework due, midterms or papers or assignments and things like that. If you know when you have actual schoolwork due, you can interweave and kind of place your DAT studying around pockets of when you have free time. So for example, I knew that for me that most of my midterms were the week before reading week started. Actually, they were all in the week before reading week started. So I knew that the next, the preceding 2 weeks, I would have to study for all of my classes. So I knew that studying was going to slow down for me in terms of DAT studying. So I needed to do more studying and, grind it out basically the previous weeks, because I knew I wouldn't have time to study for the DAT near the end, or nearing midterm season. So that's just one thing. Like, if you look ahead, it makes it much easier to plan out what you're studying for the DAT, and it makes you less stressed as well. If you know what you're doing, what's coming around the corner, you're more prepared for it, and it makes you feel as if you're not kind of just being swept away by the school year. You're not kind of feeling overwhelmed by having to study for the DAT and everything else going on in your life. Please plan ahead, because it makes studying for the DAT and managing your time just so much easier. So my last tip, and probably my most important, is to please start studying for the perceptual ability section well in advance. It's easily the hardest section and requires the most amount of time in my opinion, But people get so caught up in studying for the chem and bio sections that people honestly forget to study as hard as they should for perceptual ability. So a really easy way to study for the perceptual ability section is to download the Bootcamp Perceptual Ability app. It's available for free on the App Store. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to register for anything. You don't have to buy DAT Bootcamp. It's just available for free. So you can take it with you anywhere. You can study or you can practice perceptibility, when you're just on a break or you're waiting on the bus or just waiting in line for anything. Honestly, my friends have liked it because to them it's kind of like a mini game almost, but for us it's work. But for other people it's almost like just one of those mind games where it's perceived more as a game than actual studying. So maybe if you think of it that way, it becomes a lot easier to study for PAT. But I feel that's easily the best way to get some more experience and just be able to study kind of anytime, anywhere with perceptual ability. Because again, it is the hardest section and it's the one where people lose marks a lot. And you don't have to lose marks in perceptual ability. Some people are better at thinking in 3D than others, but it's not to say that you can't develop this skill. And so I would say start early and put in the time for perceptual ability because it's the one where you will see your marks increase. Like having a 23 or 24 in perceptual ability is killer. So, and I know you guys can do it, you just have to put in the time and start early. So for some, this video might feel a little bit all over the place, and that's kind of honestly how it felt studying for the DAT. But if there are any other questions on how to study or maybe some more resources on how to plan, things like that, feel free to reach out to me on my social media, which is in the description below. And if you guys have any other questions or any other things that you guys want me to get into or talk more about, or maybe give my personal story on anything, please leave it in the comments below or message me on the aforementioned social media, and I'll try my best to get back to all of you. So thanks. Have a nice day, guys.